We'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society, where our panel has in-depth conversations about the issues that are facing our world today. In today's episode, Scott and I continue our conversation as we talk about China Reunification, Gaffs and their ramifications, semi-fascism in the United States, and the concept of impoundment. So let's listen in. Another interesting thing was, moving out of the Middle East for a second, there was a comparison the other day by a bunch of scholars where the discussion was China had said, Xi Jinping had said that they're going to reunite the Chinese people. That's the way it's going to go. And of course, whenever we say that, we think, well, that means China's going to go into Taiwan and take over. And it was compared to when they reunited Germany, that the Germans always said, eventually we will reunite, even though, you had the one side was behind the Iron Curtain. And these scholars are basically saying that regardless of what the world thinks, China will eventually reunite. Eventually. Because that's, again, they compared it to the German reunification. So I thought that was an interesting comparison there.
Well, yeah, I'm not really sure that I think it holds water. If China were to reunite, I think it would reunite when the Communist Party has given up or lost or whatever has to happen for the mainland Chinese government to change and see the error of their ways, and that a more free Taiwan style government and society would be the at least the role model, if not the model, for them to work on. I could be totally mistaken about that, but I don't believe that when Xi says that, he means we're going to go to war. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And so you need to send strong messages to him that, no, you're not going to war. And make sure that the price is so high that they won't do it. And you can, again, carrots and sticks, you can offer them, more integration with the world again, more integration with our economy again, taking tariffs off, for example, which Biden still hasn't done from when Trump put them on, as a reward for, for good behavior, essentially, the way we look at it. And you've got to be careful when you do things like that because you don't want to send the wrong signal. But that's the, resisting a Chinese invasion of Taiwan is definitely an important thing for us to do for our own well-being. And so the model works better the other way.
Right. And I think one of the points that we're making was, as you just said, the way we look at it. When Xi says this, he means he's going to go to war. And I think, and again, I'm not agreeing with them at all. I'm saying that was the basic idea about what they were talking about is that we have to stop looking at it from our perspective and looking at it from their perspective. There's no guarantee that Xi's saying, we're going to reunify with all China is going to be reunified at some point in time actually means war. And we have to truly accept that is our perception of what that means. And until something like that was to happen, it hasn't happened. And I think that's why they were comparing. And I just found it very interesting the way that they compared the two, because even after Germany was split up after World War II, there was a concerted effort within Germany to reunify all of Germany back together. That was a thing. And it took Well, they didn't reunify until 1990. I mean, it took almost over 50 years to be able to do it. And this is something that they were making that comparison with China. And their comment was, it doesn't mean that it's going to be an invasion and a forced reunification. But if we look at the East German reunification into Germany, not all the East Germans were all that on top of that. They weren't all about it. And a lot of the West Germans weren't, because I mean I have friends over in Germany. They said when we reunified, we didn't know who the East Germans were. They weren't us. They were something totally different from the experiences they had over the past 50 years. And the difficult thing was, yeah, we spoke the same language, but they had a completely different outlook on the world than the West Germans did, and they were foreign to us. It was almost like we were integrating a foreign country into West Germany. So I just thought it was an interesting comments that some colleagues had made about that. Another interesting thing that happened. Ooh, the president of Harvard out.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I supported her being out when she couldn't hit a softball to save her life. And then, you know, I'd kind of go with the idea that bad people forced her out, but it doesn't mean that they were wrong. And so, you know, Christopher Rufo, who's the guy who invented CRT or popularized the idea of CRT, and some other really bad people on the right were the ones who went back and looked at her dissertation and looked at her papers and things like that, and publicized to the world that that it was academically lacking in integrity. Yeah. So I'm not, you know, again, I would have preferred that she just stepped down after saying one of the most ridiculous things in the history of ridiculous things. But I guess they got her one way or another. And it just, the idea that it makes, you know, Stefanik and Rufo, you know, heroes to the right, is sickening, but I guess collateral damage to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I you know, there's those, of course, that are saying that it's all race related, and you know, this was only the second female president in the history of Harvard, and only the first woman of color in the history of Harvard. And she only lasted 6 months, which is the shortest tenure of any president, and it had, you know, some sort of racial implications to it. And my thought on that, and there was actually had a discussion about this the other day. I am all for equity and inclusion, and equity brings inclusion. And if you've got equity and inclusion, that then brings diversity. It all kind of comes together. That's where DEI comes from. But it starts with equity. But equity is across the board. If you're going to get diversity and inclusion, everybody has to be included in an equitable manner. So yes, she fumbled the ball badly. You cannot then say that her ouster was because of racial reasons. You have to say it was because this person, forget the color, forget the gender, forget all that, this person fumbled a very easy question. And regardless of whether it was politically motivated or not, there were some questions about her academic integrity and some of the writings, of which Harvard is very, very serious about. One of the questions was, if this was a student, what would you do to a student at Harvard with this? And they were like, oh, well, you know, it's got to be equal across the board. Yes, everybody deserves the equity to be included, and that will bring us diversity. But once you're there, now you can't play the race card. If you make a mistake, or if you fumble the football, like was done, because that's not why you're there. You were there because of what you were, as far as your academic integrity and your leadership abilities and all this. That's supposedly why they put you there.
Right.
And you fumbled it.
Yeah. I mean, that's really the bottom line to me. You know, the fact that a racist like Christopher Rufo is one of the people who achieved her ouster is galling to me, but doesn't mean he was wrong about it. And,
Nope.
you know, she had the easiest question in the world, and she couldn't answer correctly, which would have been the simplest thing in the world to say. Absolutely, under no circumstances will we ever allow our students to be threatened with genocide based on their race, their religion, whatever it is. And, you know, it's just too easy. And she should have been gone 2 weeks ago or whenever that happened.
And it's actually the second easiest question. The first easiest question is, what was the cause of the Civil War?
Right.
That probably is. Even I honestly think, you know, somebody in 6th grade could answer that question without too much trouble. And of course, Nikki Haley absolutely bombed that question.
I'm sure you've heard this expression before, bless her heart.
Yes. And it means two things down here. It all depends on how they say it. If they say, well, bless your heart, that's a good thing. But if they say, well, bless your heart, that means, gosh, I'm looking at the dumbest ass I've ever seen in my entire life.
I guess I've only heard it that way. I never knew that that it was.
Oh yeah, no, well, you know, but there is two ways. I mean, you know, when your grandmother says, "Well, bless your heart," you know, okay, that's a sweet kind of thing. But when you know somebody looks at you and go, "Well, bless your heart," that's not good. I had to learn that. It took me 5 years to figure that out because I heard it a lot here too after I moved down here, and it was like, yeah, there's two meanings to this. So yeah, she fumbled that football. And she's getting beaten up pretty good by it. And one of the things I said about her right in the beginning, Scott, is that when she was here as the governor, she speaks to the audience. And I think Chris Christie, God love him, bless his heart, said, you know, she tells the people of Iowa one thing, and then she comes to New Hampshire, she says something totally different. When she answered that question, very badly, I might add, she was speaking to the people of South Carolina.
Well, she's speaking to a group of people who I think are, what's the word, semi-fascist.
Okay.
and she's trying to keep the semi-fascists in her camp. According to Chris Christie, she's preserving her ability to be a vice presidential candidate, which would certainly bolster her chances for the top job in a few years. And yeah, I mean, that was too easy for her to fumble, but she did. And, you know, she got over it, I guess, you know. I mean, we can move past that. I think we know who she is at this point, so there's not going to be a lot of surprises.
No, I don't think there is either. And again, for somebody that lived in the state when she was the governor, didn't do a lot. I mean, but then again, didn't do anything to hurt us either. It was sort of like a placeholder. So if that's what, you know, Republicans want as opposed to Trump, I'm okay with that. I'm quite all right with it.
Yeah. And look, I don't know have you read this new poll that's out that was so crazy. It's almost mind boggling.
Which one?
It's a Washington Post poll. Where basically 42% of Republicans now identify themselves as MAGA conservatives. Okay. So I think that's up.
Yep.
And let's just say another 29% of them are okay with semi-fascism as long as it doesn't directly affect them.
Oh, go figure.
Okay. And of the 28% who are left after that, I think the math adds up. They basically said they're going to pull the lever for him, even though they don't like, they don't identify as MAGA and they don't identify as like being pro Trump, but they still think that that they'll vote for him. And what you come out of this poll with is some truly crazy movement in the polls that suggests that more Republicans now than in 2021 believe that the election was stolen from Trump and that Biden is an illegitimate president, and that January 6th was basically either a peaceful event or one that was sparked by feds who were somehow trying to get them, or any number of other like crazy things that people seem to believe, like that there are two different militaries and one of them is good and controlled by Trump and the other is evil. We've talked about that. We've talked about that thing before. But listen to this. I mean, a 56% majority of Americans say that Trump is probably guilty of a criminal conspiracy to overturn the election results, even through false claims of voter fraud, including 40% who believe he's definitely guilty. Okay.
Okay.
This is overall Americans. But whereas 9 in 10 Democrats believe this, only 3 in 10 Republicans believe it. So there's a big bulge of independent voters in there. And the independent voters obviously are going to be who you need to get.
Right.
3 in 10 who get their information from Fox, only 3 of 10 think that Biden won the election legitimately. Here's even more crazy. A majority of Republicans believe that Trump won't concede if he loses either the primary or the general election in 2024. But they're okay with that. They don't think that his refusal to go along with the norms of our democracy is a deal breaker for them. And I mean, it's just, there are some stunning numbers in this poll. And the more Trump talks about what he's going to do as the 47th president of the United States, the more these people see him as a fascist, but are okay with that.
So long as it doesn't impact them.
So long as it doesn't impact them.
Right.
So the craziness of this country right now is it's almost a little depressing. The more he speaks, the more he talks about what his plans are. This Agenda 47 and the wiping out the federal government and impoundment. Have you caught on to that one yet?
No, I have not.
Okay, let's just listen to this. He said this the other day. He said, I will, let me get the exact quote. Hold on. I will bring the independent regulatory agencies such as the FCC, the FTC, back under presidential authority as the Constitution demands. These agencies do not get to become a fourth branch of government, issuing rules and edicts all by themselves, and that's what they've been doing. I will use the president's long-recognized impoundment power to squeeze the bloated federal bureaucracy for massive savings. Okay, so what's impoundment? Pretty much what it sounds like.
Right.
Richard Nixon, back in the 1970s, was going to use impoundment to strip funding from agencies that he didn't like, claiming that even though Congress had appropriated budgets for these agencies, he could, as the head of the executive branch, simply impound the money and refuse to spend it. So after Nixon was gone, Democrats in Congress got together, this is 1974 now, and passed legislation outlawing impoundment. And Jerry Ford, as president, signed it into law. But now Trump is bringing back that idea. I don't know who he found on his campaign staff that remembered this, that Nixon tried to do this. And they think that they can get the law overturned if they can have, both houses of Congress and a very friendly Supreme Court. And they'll simply impound the money for agencies that are supposed to be funded according to Congress and go around Congress that way.
Wow.
All right. If that's not enough, I'm going to bring up one other thing. Okay. He talks about changing the libel laws, right? And he did this a while back. He did this.
Yeah, I remember that.
Right. I forget what it was. It was either a book that came out about him or it was Saturday Night Live, right?
Right.
And he said, we're going to take a strong look at our country's libel laws so that when somebody says something that is false and defamatory about someone, that person has meaningful recourse in our courts. I mean, how hysterical is that with a cell phone? And if somebody says something that's totally false and knowingly false, that the person has been abused, defamed, libeled, will have meaningful recourse. And he seems to think that this applies to him in some way, right?
Right.
But he's following, apparently, the blueprint of one Viktor Orban, who in Hungary got rid of the news media and replaced the ownership of all the major radio and TV networks, newspapers, websites, by changing libel laws so that he could sue them for libel when he thought that they were treating him unfairly, and then suing company after company, commentator after commentator, reporter after reporter into bankruptcy, and then his buddies buy up those now cheaper bankrupt media properties out of bankruptcy, which is why now in Hungary there's nothing but state news or Fox News type broadcasting that sucks up to Orban and criticizes liberals and immigrants and gays and so on and so forth. And that's the playbook that Trump wants to take.
Yes. That is incredible. And the fact that people are okay with that. Honestly, every time I talk to Brooklyn, it's like, I think the thing that just boggles my mind is that the American people are okay with this. And that statement, fascism is fine as long as it doesn't impact me. If that's your government, it's going to impact you.
Oh, yeah. I
mean, the idea that some of these people that they interview that are, the forever Trumpers, it just amazes me. It's like, do you really think that you're going to be immune from all the things that are being done? Matter of fact, it's going to be your group of people. And these are lower income, lower educated people that are going to be most impacted by it. You think that they're going to go after the elites? Well, yeah, they will. Just kind of like Germany did before World War II. They went after the academic elites. They went after the economic elites. They did. But eventually, it impacts the people. And how they don't see this is just, again, I cannot fathom the abject stupidity that we're seeing today of the American people. We always were supposedly exceptional, and it really turns out that we're not really all that exceptional at all. We're just like everybody else. We fall for conspiracy theories. We believe it's everybody else, not us, and we are a society of entitlement. We think we're entitled to these things. And Trump keeps telling us, I'm going to do this because you're entitled to it. What they don't understand is that eventually your entitlement becomes the entitlement that's on the chopping block. And they just don't get it. And that really, the United States needs a good psychiatrist. Plain and simple. It just needs a good psychiatrist. A little bit of deprogramming wouldn't hurt, because all of this is going to impact, and it's going to impact us in the world. And they're going to see us as weaker. They're not going to see us as stronger. And this is going to embolden some people. This is going to embolden some countries. And it doesn't mean that somebody's going to attack the United States. That is not what it is, because we still have this massively powerful military. But it does mean that they can hurt us economically. If we are a weak country, as far as our policies are concerned, they're going to hurt us where it really matters, and that's going to impact the lower income people, and they just don't see it coming. They just do not see it.
Well, I know Biden's making a speech this week. I think it's Thursday at Valley Forge, and then he's going after that down to Charleston.
Yep.
To make a speech there. He better get it together. He's got a lot of work to do with young people. He's got a lot of work to do with African Americans. He's got to pull this coalition back together again, and somehow or another he's got to convince poorer, less educated white people, as you say, that he's their man, not Trump, and that what Trump is headed for right now, what this country is headed for, if that model takes hold, is what George Carlin once described. It's a big club and you're not in it. And right. The rich get richer, the winners win, the losers lose, that whole thing. It's going to be really rough on people. And I don't think that they're seeing it coming. And young people especially right now who are, angry about Israel, don't understand the actual conflict that goes on there, angry about, student loans, not getting rid of their student loans enough, although he's done, I think, a tremendous job of getting rid of a lot of them. And the idea that they don't have cheap housing, that we need in New York alone, like a million housing units for people to live in, that we're behind in. There's a lot that needs to be done. But I think you and I are old enough to remember that before Reagan, we had an upwardly mobile society. We no longer do, but don't blame the wrong people for it. This is Reaganism that is causing this. This is Reaganism that needs to be reversed. And the only way that that's going to happen is if you can get both houses of Congress and a Democratic president who's going to keep moving in this direction. He's not doing it as quickly as I wish. Obviously, he didn't get Manchin to do a couple of the things that I really wish he had. I was really angry to read about the governors of Nebraska and Iowa who opted out of the summer EBT program, mainly because my daughter, when she was in college down in Tampa, did a student teaching gig at a local elementary school there. And when she asked one of the kids what they were doing for, I guess it was spring break or summer vacation, the kid said, "I'm going to be looking for food." And she said she just put her head down on the desk and cried because she realized how bad these kids' lives are.
Right.
And that they don't get enough food at home. And for the governor of Iowa to say that we have an obesity problem in this country and giving these kids cards that allow them to go to their parents to go to the store and buy food for them only encourages that, is like, it's not just insane. It's aggravating. It's angrifying. It just makes me, really so upset with the fact that you can vote for this, that you voted for this. And this is what you're getting.
Well, again, getting the government that you deserve. And they'll probably reelect him in Iowa and Nebraska and places like that. That's the sad fact of it, that they get into this echo chamber. They get into this rut and they just simply can't get themselves out. And I think a lot of it's because they can't admit they were wrong. So many of the issues that they bring down to Biden at this point in time really isn't Biden, it's the Congress. You want to be mad at somebody, be mad at the Congress, because they're the ones that control the purse strings. And but nobody seems to be all that terribly upset with just Congress. They were saying the other day, this is the most do nothing Congress that we've ever experienced in quite some time. They've passed like 33 bills or something, some ridiculously low number where normally they pass 300-400. So it's just the fact that people listen to Fox News and believe that, oh, well, yeah, okay, they told me who's at fault here, therefore it must be true. And we'll conclude this conversation in our next episode. So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd also like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis and is a publication of NovaWorks, a scholarly depository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Podkite, who does all our analytics, iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source for music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms mentioned in our description. We'd also like to thank our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, a question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gerschwer, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.